Today we are talking about some new microphones that I just got, as well as the company that makes them that I'm quickly becoming enamored with, Lauten Audio. So Lauten is a name that I've been vaguely familiar with for a while, but has recently come more to my attention with the release of their Snare series on YouTube. If you're not familiar with the Snare series, it is an absolute gift to recording engineers, to drummers, and musicians alike. It takes famous drummers and reunites them with snares that they used on seminal albums or snares that were special to them, and gets them in Dave Grohl's studio, mics them up really, really well, and then just has them play with these different legendary historic snares. Now, these are basically shot documentary style, so the marketing is very light, but it is apparently effective because I, like probably many people, became suddenly very aware of the microphones that they were using, and I started to notice some of the recent things that Lauten's been doing with their microphones specifically for drummers. There are a couple of mics that have been purpose-built to have really good rejection and isolation for particular instruments. There's a mic that's kind of preferred for toms, and then there's the so-named and purpose-built snare mic that seems to be getting a lot of well-deserved attention lately. Now, I hope to be able to check those mics out at some point, but for right now, what I've got for you is a pair of the LA-120 small diaphragm FET condensers. Now, if you're wondering why I only have one of them, it's because the other one is actually recording my voice right now. You might be able to just barely see it up here. I actually reached out to Lauten, which I rarely do with companies, and it's rare that companies reach out to me, but I just liked the vibe and I just liked what they were doing in the recording world right now, and I just wanted to reach out and say, hey, if you ever want product photography, or if you ever want someone to demo any of your products, I'd love to check some stuff out. And little did I know when I reached out that I would be talking directly to Trent, the president of the company. He was super cool, really immediately easy to talk to, and he said, yeah, why don't I just send you a couple of the 120s and you just tell us what you think. And I asked, I said, is there anything that you want me to make, like a particular video focusing on certain things? And he was like, hey, we don't ask anyone to make anything in particular for us. He said, you don't have to make a video. He says, you don't have to say anything in particular about the microphone. So that's kind of my disclaimer that I did get these for free at the moment, but that I am very much not being influenced in what I say. So I'll try and give you some fairly thorough demos of this microphone, as well as some personal positives and negatives, why you might or might not want to buy this. So first of all, what do you get with these mics? Well, for roughly 500 bucks, you get a pair of these sort of pencil style small diaphragm condensers. They come in a very nice box, and they have some very helpful literature to get you started and talk you through the switches, which is the first thing that you're going to notice that might be different than some other condensers that you've used. Now, this is good because the mic on its own is a fairly flat, I almost want to say sterile sounding condenser microphone. And then the switches really are what kind of make it more of a Swiss Army knife, or a mic that can be used in a variety of different situations. So you can slap that 10 kilohertz low pass filter on there and it becomes a little more ribbon-like, and you can use, of course, that high pass filter to get rid of some of the rumble and some of the muddiness down at the low end. So before I ramble too much more, let's actually hear the microphone. Now, you are hearing me speak through it right now, but I've also done some demos comparing this mic to what is sort of my reference point when it comes to small diaphragm condensers, the Oktava MK012. This is a vintage mic. It's a fairly cheap mic, but it's just one that's been a great workhorse for me and for lots of people for a long time. I usually use this as a center overhead. I use it for hi-hats, etc., etc. So that's kind of my point of reference, and I've used it as the first mic you're going to hear. And then I've got the LA-120 flat, and then with all of the different switch selections so you can hear what those different filters sound like in context. So let's hear all of those compared. So a few things I noticed right off the bat about this mic. One is that it is much more, like I said before, almost clinical sounding than the Oktava. The Oktava is sort of on its own already a little bit vibey, if I can use that word, whereas the LA-120 is much brighter and much more in your face. And specifically, the transient response in the 120 is unlike kind of any of my mics I have right now. The transient response is really something else. And I should note that using the mic, you know, right up here, I don't know how high this is, but this high above the drum set, I was getting clipping issues unless I used the optional inline 10 dB pad. I believe that's something that you have to buy separately. And I found that these mics are really, really sensitive, which in many ways is a good thing. But it also means that if you're gonna use this for drums, even as an overhead, you definitely should get the inline pad. And in fact, even right now, where I'm just speaking at a relatively normal volume, I really don't have the gain set that high at all on the preamp that this is recording into, and I'm still getting very healthy signal. You can also unscrew and screw on new capsules to take this from a cardioid pattern to an Omni pattern. So here's a demo now of the cardioid pattern with a little bit of a mix thrown on it. I've got some EQ and some compression that I've put on there, and I'm just gonna compare that back and forth from the cardioid capsule to the Omni capsule. So here's what that sounds like. Okay, so let's talk about some positives and negatives. Why might you or might you not consider this microphone? So on the positive end, these are relatively affordable mics that sound great and are quite flexible with the options built in, the high pass and low pass filter options. Additionally, with the removable capsules and the inline pad, you have even more flexibility, and you can use this on virtually any source. That said, there are lots of similar condenser microphones out there that will do similar things that you might consider. Although I will say that specifically the transient response of these mics is really something I haven't heard in any other mic out there. So if that's something that really grabs you, then that might be worth the price of admission alone. It's also worth noting that you're buying from a relatively small company. So if personal connection and shopping in that sort of way is something that's important to you, it's another reason you might consider this company over one of the giants like Shure, AKG, or some of the more standard companies that everyone's heard of. I think basically everyone should have a pair of small diaphragm condensers. They are essential for me when I'm recording piano, oftentimes when I'm recording drums, and those are kind of my main two use cases for these types of mics. Now, some potential negatives are just things to consider. If you are looking for a microphone that has a lot of character, whatever that means, right out of the box, this may not be it. Yes, you have a lot of flexibility, and as soon as you throw that 10K low pass filter on there, it becomes a very different mic, but if it doesn't push it far enough in that direction for you, you might consider something vintage or something designed to have a little more flavor. Additionally, if size is something that is important to you, this is much larger than my Oktava and similar sorts of small diaphragm condensers. These ones are fairly long, especially when you put the inline pad on there, so just a little size comparison. And the last thing I feel compelled to mention, though I don't think this is actually a problem, is the inline pads that I got and the Omni capsules both had a manufacturing issue where they just didn't work properly. So I had to send those back and get new ones sent to me, but the process was super easy, super simple. And yeah, the ones that I received in return were just fine. So again, just to recap, this is a cool company that you should have your eye on, especially if you're a drummer. This is a cool mic that if you're in the market for a small diaphragm condenser, that you should also have your eye on. And if you're interested in hearing more examples, maybe this used on hi-hat or I don't know, in just other scenarios, let me know and I'd be happy to do that in a future video. Also, if you'd like to see any demos of the dedicated tom mics and the snare mic, let me know. But until then, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.